cover crop is a description of that includes a lot of different species, right? So typically what we call cover crops are plants that we are using for benefits that are not necessarily for feed production, for example, although most, if not all of those cover crop species can be harvested or grazed for forage for sure.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm your host, Brandy Buzzard, and it's my pleasure to bring you the latest trends and issues from the best and brightest minds in the beef industry. Today we are joined by Dr. Marta Kohmann, Assistant Professor of Forage Systems Agroecology in the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences at the University of Wisconsin Madison. Dr. Kohmann earned her master's in climatology and her PhD in forage management, both from the University of Florida. Dr. Kohmann has a background as a generalist agronomist, making her uniquely qualified to work with a systems-level approach. She has experienced a variety of fields within forage management, quantifying the benefits from the adoption of legumes in subtropical environments, understanding animal selection in multi-species pastures, and evaluating the effects of prescribed fire in rangelands. Dr. Kohmann joined UW-Madison in 2023 and is currently working with perennial pastures, alfalfa, and cover crops managed for persistence and production. I am really excited to talk about grass and cows and other kind of agronomy and ecological systems with her. If you guys have listened to the podcast for more than a hot minute, you know that I geek out about grazing and grass. So with that, let's dive right in. Dr. Kohmann, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the invite. Very happy to be here. And I feel like you made me sound a lot cooler than what I am.
No, it's your bio. It's the truth about you. So to start off with, just to kind of make everybody kind of aware of your work and things like that, if you could just bring us up to speed on your background, how you got started in the beef industry and grazing industry, and kind of your career thus far, that would be really great.
Yes, of course. So I grew up in southern Brazil, and I'm from a farming family. So my grandpa back in the day bought land that we use for farming. We used to be a dairy farm. And then during the 80s, we had a series of very bad droughts that made dairy production really hard. So we transitioned into grain production, primarily corn and soybean. Our climate in southern Brazil is very mild, so winter temperatures do get to freezing levels, but a lot of the forages we grow here in the United States in the summertime, like small grains and clovers, we can grow them in what we call our winter time. So with that, we end up rotating a lot between grain production in the summertime, and then in the wintertime, we get stocker cattle, typically from our border with Uruguay, where they have a lot of cow-calf operations. And then we grow them at our farm, and then we sell them for beef. So that's kind of where the environment where I grew up. My father actually is also an agronomist and does have a master's degree in forage management. So I think that growing up in that environment just really made me love science and farming in particular. Just having that sense of how much you have to work and how little control you have over a number of factors like climate, the economy. I think that those challenges made me always feel like this was a profession worth pursuing, because you're basically sustaining society with food, fiber, and fuel, despite all of these challenges. So that's something that I feel like I learned to value a lot. And as I spend time with farming people from all sorts of locations in the world, I feel like there are some characteristics that are so common among farmers, and one of them is a sense of resilience, a sense of respect for the environment. Those things are true, like if you talk to farmers anywhere in the world. So I do think that even though I'm now living in the United States, it's a different country, but I feel like that sense of community and that sense of valuing hard work is the same that I grew up in. So that's something that brings me a lot of joy for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful that, it runs in your family. That's wonderful to hear. Like you have that, you said, a profession worth pursuing, I think is what you said, something like that. That's very, like a heartwarming way to hear it. So
your cattle are constantly threatened by the exposure of mycotoxins in feed. Now you can know if mycotoxins are present in your feed and what you should do about it. DSM Firmenich offers a range of analytical services to assess the mycotoxin contamination and solutions to combat mycotoxins. Don't let mycotoxins contaminate your performance. Visit dsm-firmenich.com/mycotoxin-survey to learn more.
You talked about, your dad has a master's in agronomy, and then you are in this ecologic field. And so I'm just going to dive right in because I know that cover crops are kind of your thing that you specialize in. So cover crops have been at the top of people's minds, and people would be moving forward and managing those cover crops. They may be chopping rylage or something like that. So could you just speak to a little bit about like the importance of cover crops, why people might use them, things of that nature?
Yes, of course. That's such a good comment. So when I think about cover crops, there's a lot of different aspects to cover crops. One, cover crop is a description that includes a lot of different species, right? So typically what we call cover crops are plants that we are using for benefits that are not necessarily for feed production, for example, although most, if not all of those cover crop species can be harvested or grazed for forage for sure. But there is such a diversity of species. You have small grains, you have warm season grasses, you have perennials and annuals, and you have legumes, all that can be used for cover crops. The importance of using cover crops is, I feel like it's multifold, right? There's a lot of different benefits. So one, in a grain system in particular, it's a great way to keep cover and also make sure that nutrients are cycling and are not leaving your system, right? Because if you have a green cover of a cover crop, that means that those plants are growing, they're utilizing the nutrients, and once they're terminated, they will return those nutrients to the soil, right?
Yes.
And then, so that's, of course, very important for grain systems. In addition to that, cover crops are very helpful to help control weeds. And they do that in a number of ways. One of them is just they compete with weed species for water, light, nutrients, etc. Another way is physically, sometimes they really cause an impediment for those weeds to grow. And they also, sometimes they will reduce the soil temperature a little bit because they're intercepting so much of that solar radiation. So if the soil temperature is lower, then the seed germination of those weeds is also lower. And I mentioned that in particular to grain systems because that's where a lot of herbicide-resistant weeds have shown up. They're typically in corn, grain, and soybean systems. When we think about a forage system, especially if we think about harvested systems where we're removing a lot of biomass, having those cover crops to protect the soil and water resources is particularly important. Oftentimes in forage systems where you have a lot of harvesting, that is also a way to control weeds. So they can be a problem, but they're typically not as big of a problem as in grain systems. But in this case, the cover crops just really help with the conservation, with soil health and all that.
So all right. So I know that like legumes are nitrogen replacing. So I know that that's one aspect of cover crops. But are all cover crops nitrogen replacing, or are they? It sounds like a stupid question coming out of my mouth, but this is not my area of expertise. So, like, for example, our neighbor has a big crop field that butts up against our land, and in the past, he's put corn on it, and then our cattle have grazed the corn stalks. And then there have been years where he has sowed turnips into it, and to my knowledge, like the turnips, they grow and then they like aerate the soil or something like that. I don't know if that's right, but like, could you just give some examples of cover crops that aren't nitrogen replacing, or maybe they are, just like the different benefits? Because for me, I hear cover crop and I'm like, oh, it replaces nitrogen, but
yeah.
We shouldn't paint things with broad brushes. I know that. So could you just give silly me some insight into a few different cover crops and what they provide back to the soil from a soil health standpoint? I also would like to plant turnips on my place, just for turnip's sake, I guess.
Yeah. So first of all, that's not a silly question. That's a great question, because cover crops includes just so many different species. And depending on what you need or what's your objective with that cover crop, you should use those needs to match to the adequate species, right? That's what we do. So the nitrogen replacement ones, as you said, the legumes, those plants are the plants that are able to host this rhizobia microorganism that is in the soil. Sometimes they're very specific microorganisms that need to be matched to the specific crop. So a lot of times when you buy the seed, you get that already inoculated with that microorganism. Sometimes if you've grown that legume long enough in a specific location, then the soil still have those microorganisms, and that will be great for nitrogen fixation. And fun fact, nitrogen fixation. So the nitrogen that is used by this legumes comes from the atmosphere. So that's like 70% of the gases in the atmosphere. Around 70% is nitrogen. And nitrogen gas is two nitrogens that are holding on to each other by 3 bonds. So it takes an enormous amount of energy to break those bonds and produce biological nitrogen, right? So that's the most expensive in terms of energy biological reaction that exists on the earth. So the fact that planting legumes can actually do that for you is absolutely a superpower of this plant. So that's one of the benefits. Also, typically, these are species that will have a main root. So they're really good, especially in exploring the soil in depth. So for grasses, a little bit different. So they don't fix nitrogen, but they're really good in utilizing nutrients. So we see that especially when we, let's say that you need a time to apply manure to your field because you have a dairy and the manure container is filling up, you're getting into the winter, you need to empty that out. A grass is a great option because they have this fibrous root system. So they can go very deep as well, especially perennials. But where they really shine is they explore the soil in volume really, really well because they have a bunch of very tiny roots. Again, some of the perennials especially can grow, and even annual grasses can grow very deep in the soil. But generally speaking, it's like the volume of soil that they can explore is outstanding. And then we have our brassicas, like turnips. I haven't worked a lot with brassicas, but I was actually just in the Midwest Cover Crop Symposium a couple of weeks ago. And there were some people that were presenting work on the adoption of brassicas as a cover crop. And they do show, like the turnips, for example, really kind of like pushing that soil and creating those macropores that really help the water go through the soil profile. So it helps avoid like water lodging, etc. And I think this specific work, they were looking at brassica mixtures for feeding lambs, I think. And one of the things I mentioned is like once those turnips come out, then the lambs are very happy. It's really
Sure they are.
The one thing I will mention, and this is true for any cover crop / forage, we should always just pay attention to like a couple of things. So for example, legumes can cause bloating, for example, and I believe that the brassicas can also cause that. And that's basically because bloating typically will happen when there's a lot of very soluble nitrogen in a crop. So again, this is all, I think all forages are good and they have a place. All cover crops have their match to a different system. It's just that some of them have this like little details you have to pay attention to.
And there's another detailed question here. We have used rye as a cover crop at our house, and then chopped it and made, I guess you call it rylage, like rylage bales. So that one would be a which one would that fall under? That's going to be a nitrogen replacing one, the rye is, or what?
No.
That would,
yeah. So because rye is a grass, not a legume, that would be not a nitrogen replacing, but it would be a great option for nutrient use efficiency in the system. And I mean, rye is one of, I think it's the most widely used cover crop in the United States, and the acreage the acreage is increasing because it's such a great cover crop. It grows really well, produces a lot of biomass, and if you harvest before reproductive stage, like the nutritive value is excellent.
Oh yeah, and cattle love it. Like if you've got, they'll mow it down, and you get a rain, and it'll come right back. It grows so fast. It's wonderful. I think it's wonderful.
Me too.
Yeah, and so I think you did some work. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've done some work in your tenure with rye. Is there anything about that specifically that you can share with us about rye?
Yes. So one particular work that I'm invested in right now, and I have 2 graduate students and 3 graduate students working on it. And this is in collaboration with the USDA ARS Dairy Forage Research Center that's also here in Madison. I'm working with a number of collaborators that are plant breeders. So one of them, Dr. Lisa Kissing-Kusak, is working a lot with all sorts of annual cover crops. And one of the lines of work that we found, we're both very interested in this, is what we call allelopathy in cereal rye. So that's a very long word. There's a lot of syllables. I might be mispronouncing this, but we're just going to roll with it at this time.
You are the expert, so I believe that is the way it is pronounced, is allelopathy. That's how you said it, and so you're the expert.
We might be teaching the wrong pronunciation to the entire audience, and then it will be my fault.
That's all right. It's okay.
Yeah, so allelopathy is this capacity that a plant has. So it's a natural thing where a plant produces a chemical that will kill or reduce germination of other plant species around it. So this is naturally occurring in just the world. Some plants simply have that ability. And for those who work with alfalfa is different. Alfalfa has an autotoxicity, right? So alfalfa produces a chemical that kills other alfalfa. So that's one of the reasons why when we are rotating alfalfa, if we have a bad establishment, we cannot reestablish alfalfa on alfalfa. Or after we terminate alfalfa, we need 1 to 2 years till we come back with alfalfa.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mechanism. And I have a colleague in Michigan, Dr. Kim Cassida, who is like the greatest expert in it. So she's trying to figure out different ways to test it, which is really cool. So cereal rye it's a little bit different. Cereal rye loves cereal rye. Cereal rye is trying to prevent other plant species to grow around it. So we know some things about this allelopathy thing, and some things we don't know. And what we don't know is greater than what we know, which gives me a lot of ideas for experiments to test questions, right? But a couple of things that we do know. So one, we know that the capacity to produce these chemicals is genetic. So you can actually breed that trait in or out of your population. So my breeder colleagues are working to identify like high allelopathy lines that you could grow in grain systems, because that can help you with weed control, right? So in addition to all the other benefits of cover crops, you also get these chemicals that could help control weeds. Now, one of the challenges is, and this is especially here for Wisconsin, where we do have a lot of alfalfa. We got a question for a producer who had a rye field, established alfalfa into that field within a day of termination, and the alfalfa didn't come up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or came up very, very poorly. And the question was, could this be allelopathy? And it could be a number of things, right? Maybe that rye was just like too much biomass. So when we were planting the alfalfa, the seed actually didn't make it to the soil.
It didn't emerge or something like that.
Yeah. Or the cereal rye was competing with the alfalfa, et cetera, et cetera. So as a good scientist, I was like, we need to make an experiment to test these different questions. So the first thing I did was trying to look in the literature to find out, like, what do we know? So we know most of the chemicals that have that effect in the plant. So we know what they are. We know that they happen in both the roots and the above ground biomass, so roots and shoots. We also know that it tends to be worse once the cereal rye gets to the reproductive stage. And again, we know that it's genetic. So I went into the literature and found what had been tested already, made a little list, made that's available in an article it just got out. I'm happy to share that with you later. And then I went to look like, well, let's see how this is being tested. So most of the tests are done in like Petri dishes. So you basically make a rye juice, you put that in a Petri dish, you put a crop seed in there and compare that to just water and see if it germinates or not.
Rye juice, that sounds really good.
Yeah, it must smell wonderful. I like it like tea. But one of the challenges is that, of course, if we're testing these chemicals, we are testing those chemicals with plants that we know are sensitive to it, right? So typically what researchers have used in the past is lettuce or tomatoes.
Okay.
And from the various tests that have been done, what we know is it seems to be worse for small seeded plants because the area relative to volume is so big, and worse for dicots compared to monocots. Dicots are your legumes or brassicas. Your monocots are your grasses. So I'm here in Wisconsin, and I'm thinking, well, we do have a dicot with a very small seed, alfalfa. We plant it all the time. And rye is such an important forage, so a lot of the time we do have those rotations. We need to make sure that the rye that we're using is not detrimental to the alfalfa. So we have this establishment, we established this experiment in the field for one of my students, and we planted a cover crop that's not allelopathic, and then 2 cereal rice that are medium and high. And the high one is Andy Gardner, and the medium now it escapes me, but it will come to me. And then we tried a bunch of different establishment strategies for the alfalfa. So we terminated the rye, and then we tilled it, we harvested and then terminated, or we planted green. And we just planted the same type of alfalfa, the same cultivar. And what we found is that if the alfalfa was establishing after Andy Gardner, which was the very high allelopathy one, the biomass production was lower for the alfalfa, and the weed biomass was greater, which is, we were trying to think like, well, can we use the cereal rye to help control the weeds? And in this case, the weed population was greater. So this is what we think happened, is because Andy Gardner really kind of was really preventing the alfalfa to grow well and vigorously. What happened is that we had a lot of kind of like openings in the field, and that's where the weeds established.
That's where the weeds came up, yeah.
Yeah. So if this allelopathic cover crop is bad for your cash crop, then you can have an increase in weed biomass in your field. Interestingly, so the other cereal rye was Alban rye, that's the medium allelopathy, and we had a triticale as our control. And if we harvested that cover crop and established alfalfa on it, beautiful stands. Absolutely amazing. So actually having that cover crop almost worked as having a nurse crop. It's just that it cannot be a high allelopathy one. So the lesson so far, one, we're going to repeat this because we need to understand it better. We always get 2 years. 2, we also know that it depends on the alfalfa type. So some cultivars are more sensitive than others. So that's another project that we're running this year, where we're testing a bunch of them. And then 3, cover crops are still great. We just, we just need to manage it properly.
Yeah.
And again, the challenge is a lot of these different lines of rye, they are tested for allelopathy, even in the field with lettuce. So the breeders figure out that lettuce is very sensitive to this chemical. So of course, that is the crop we're going to use to test whether or not this is allelopathic or not, right? So the next step working this collaboration is to see if the cash crops are sensitive to these allelochemicals or not. So we have an experiment with corn for grain. And so far, it doesn't seem like the corn gets affected at all. But again, I say both these things with caution because we still need a couple more data points to be more confident on our results. But I find it so interesting to have this additional mechanism for weed control and another benefit for cover crops. So
yeah, that's super interesting. So is there a way to know what rye varieties, like, are they marketed as allelopathy? Or you just have to, like, if someone had never heard this podcast, right, and never learned about allelopathy rye, are they just flying blind when they choose one, and then and then they have more weeds and their alfalfa doesn't grow, and they're like, what happened? Why did this rye do this? So like, you don't really have a way to know, like you're doing the work to determine which rye varieties are the allelopathy.
Yes. So not only me. So most of the evaluation is done by the breeders themselves. Okay. It's just that typically that information is not open to the public, which is I don't know. We just don't have as you said, we don't have a way to market the seed accordingly. And one of the challenges is, again, for example, Alban rye is allelopathic, but it's a medium allelopathy. Okay. So it is allelopathic, but it's not bad for alfalfa, for example. So it's a lot harder than, for example, herbicide planting interval. Like you use a herbicide, like you have the little small letters at the in the information that says like, oh, you need to wait this many months to plant this other crop if you use this herbicide or something like that. It's a lot harder for this because it's a biological kind of reaction. I did make a list of the ones that I found, for which I found information, and that's in an article in Hay and Forage that just came out. But I'm also happy to provide that information if anyone has that question.
Yeah, you have to give us that link and we can put it in the show notes so people can listen to it. Because I'm just thinking if I wanted to go buy rye as a cover crop, like next, November, October, November, something like that, I wouldn't have any way of knowing which one. Had I not listened to this episode or recorded it with you, I would have no way of knowing which one I should go look for. So, we'd love to have that article, and then I can put it in the show notes for as our listeners are hearing us talk about this. Listeners, I will get that article and put it in the show notes for you so you can go read it. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and that again was I had the exact same frustration because producers would ask me and like, I don't know, there's no information. So I spent a good afternoon looking and for information. So because I spent so much time on it, I just use it in all my presentations now.
Yeah, but this is a testament to the importance of research because like every once in a while I think, man, we've been doing agricultural research for like over 100 years, right? Like, I don't know exactly how long, but a really long time, over 100 years. And so what else is there? Like, haven't we exhausted all of the research topics and things? But clearly not, because we've got some of these rye have little warriors in their seeds that's knocking out other crops or knocking out weeds that like we didn't know about. And I just find that so interesting. So, I mean, thank you for doing the research. I'm really interested. I'm going to have to like set a calendar reminder in my planner for 2027. I'm going to have to write like, look into allelopathy cereal rye and which ones are like quote unquote safe for my main crops or whatever, because I just find that so interesting. It's just so interesting. I just have to take this moment to remind our listeners that if you're enjoying this conversation and geeking out about grass and cover crops with Dr. Kohmann and I, if you're enjoying this episode of the Beef Podcast presented by WiseNetics, please remember to like and subscribe and share it with your friends and family so they can also be intrigued about cereal rye and alfalfa and things of that nature. I want to touch, you mentioned alfalfa briefly earlier, and I do want to touch on that because I think we have a lot of alfalfa in the United States, right? Like the horse people who are listening are like, yes, let's talk about alfalfa. But I know alfalfa is a legume, so it is nitrogen replacing, but do, people that plant alfalfa usually are harvesting it, right? Like, for hay or for forage. So do a lot of the nutrients do you get a lot of nutrients removed from the soil when you're harvesting them, right? So like, are the benefits of it being canceled out due to ag machinery or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's such a good point. And yes, I love alfalfa. I call it like a very beautiful monster in terms of it just produces so much biomass and is so resilient as a forage. And the root system is amazing. It grows really deep. I remember the first time I worked with alfalfa and I dug a plant out, I was like, this looks like a carrot. This is how big that taproot is. It's amazing. I'm working in a number of fronts in that sense. So one of them is, absolutely. Grazed systems and harvested systems, one of the fundamental differences is in grazed systems, you have those animals, they consume the forage, but they also get nutrients back through urine and dung, right?
Yeah.
So the need to replenish those nutrients, you still have to monitor and replenish them every so often, but is smaller than in harvested systems where you are removing all this biomass, and this biomass has nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So we need to keep an eye on that. So we are, there is a resource, there is a project that we just got approved from the Dairy Innovation Hub here at UW that is going to measure that across the state, because we do have some data, but it's from the 80s, more or less, in terms of how much nutrients we are removing.
The 80s are getting to be a long time ago. So
that is a concern. Yeah. So everything has changed. Like the equipment has changed. The genetics is different now. The management is different. So those are things that are always changing. And we need to update these recommendations. One of the challenges is getting funding to do that, because this is not considered very novel. So it's hard to find a good place to get funding to run this analysis, right? Because we need to do a tissue chemical analysis, and that can add up in terms of cost quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's definitely something we are working on. And I'm just looking at some data here for some of our recent work, where we were looking particularly to like what's happening to our nutrient recommendations, and should we be updating this? So just I'll let the listener think about this for a minute. Like how much nutrients do we think that we remove? So we, for 1 year of forage harvested, we ran this experiment at 2 locations. We collected the biomass, we did the analysis, and then we quantify it. So what we thought we were taking out was, 13 pounds of P2O5 per ton of dry matter. And when we ran the analysis, that was between 14, not too far, but up to 18 pounds of P2O5. So that's almost 40% more than what we initially thought was going to happen, as in like what we will look at our recommendations. And then for potassium, so one of the challenges with potassium is just a part of the plant tissue. So that's one of the nutrients that gets removed a lot when removing biomass. So hay, silage, any kind of system like that. So in terms of K2O, we assumed we were going to remove around 60 pounds of K2O per ton of dry matter, and we're removing around 75.
Oh, wow. That's a big difference.
Yeah. So that's definitely something we want to understand better, so that we can adapt our recommendations to better match what our systems need right now. And so again, we're very excited. We got some more funding to run these types of analysis, but that just goes to say, test your soil, make sure that you are at a good level of nutrients, especially potassium and phosphorus. But yeah, nothing will substitute just monitoring. You have to monitor your cattle, you have to monitor your forages and your soil as well.
Right. So are there different, that's amazing to remove that it removes that much, but that also there was that difference between what you thought and what was actually happening. Do different, trying to think of how to say this, like, do different kinds of equipment have different effects on alfalfa and like nutrient removal?
That's a great question. So the effect that a piece of equipment will have on nutrient removal is more so a function of how it affects just biomass production, right? So as you said, we have all these different pieces of equipment that run over the ground when we're harvesting alfalfa. And one thing that we found out, and this is in collaboration with a colleague of mine who's an engineer, Dr. Brian Luck, and another colleague that's a soil scientist. Again, I love working with Forage Systems because then I can work with all these cool people. So Dr. Francisco Arriaga is our soil physicist. And there are a number of things that we found out. One, not all pieces of equipment will affect the soil the same way. So even if 2 pieces of equipment, they have the same weight exactly, if they have a road tire, it's going to put a lot more pressure on the soil compared to an ag tire.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Right? It's like, it makes total sense, but like the difference was so much more than what we thought. So one of the things that we're evaluating now is we're literally driving on top of alfalfa fields with all sorts of equipment and quantifying, just putting a number on how that might be affecting the forage biomass. And what we found is when we use especially trucks driving on the fields, we can get a reduction of up to 30% in biomass. And that's above ground.
Wow.
Yeah, so we also collected below ground, and that was like a 15% decrease in below ground biomass. And like, why should we care about below ground biomass? We're not feeding that to the cow, right? But that's a big determinant of how persistent your field is going to be. So that below ground biomass is where all the reserves for regrow are stored for alfalfa. So especially coming into the winter, we need to have those alfalfas like well fed, let's say. And we need those root systems to be really well developed and healthy. So if we are damaging the root system, and that happens both because of physical damage and then also soil compaction. So sometimes the soil gets so compacted that the roots don't have enough strength to grow. So all those things are going to affect how much nutrients and water they're able to absorb, and they're going to affect how much forage production we're going to get. So, and then again, alfalfa is autotoxic. So if you start thinning out your field, you cannot replant alfalfa. You have to either terminate, get those nitrogen credits, or you can plant something into that alfalfa stand like a grass or something to increase the biomass. But yeah, it's been very interesting. It's very, I always tell my students, it's very unfortunate that a lot of the things that are interesting happen below ground. Because I'll tell you, after you have been like digging plants for like 3 or 4 hours, it's not as fun.
Well, too, but I actually did know the importance of healthy root systems, like that they break up soil compaction, and that they intrude water, the capability of water to get down, and your nutrient profile. So that makes sense. I did not know that an alfalfa root was like so long like that, but that makes sense that if you have all these you said road tire versus an ag tire, like driving on it, and you're negatively impacting, I won't say ruining, but negatively impacting the roots below, how that is going to have a negative impact on your overall soil health. And so I could geek out with you about grass for several hours. I love this. Like, I think it's so important to be a lifelong learner. And so I appreciate that you're sharing this all with me and with our audience. A lot of times I forget that there is an audience that will listen to this, and it's not just me getting to talk to and hear about all your cool research.
Yeah, the time is going by very quickly.
Yes, this is wonderful. So that's just, is there anything else? Because I know that we could just keep talking about alpha, but is there anything about your work or like some advice to producers, like some quick advice to producers, whether from a cover crop standpoint or alfalfa management, that you can give our producers just like as a closing thought before we move into our like closing questions of the day?
Yes, of course. So what I think is amazing is what we need to focus is we need to match our cover crop or forage to our animal category. So there are just so many options of species that we can use, we can grow. All we need to do is match those two things together. So even if you haven't tried a crop before, my advice is always start slow, do like a couple of acres or 5 acres to get the hang of it. Talk to your neighbors to see like equipment setup, stuff like that, because that can change a little bit from one to another species. But just, I don't know, kind of enjoy in a way. And there's no bad or good forage or cover crop. There is a place in the sun for all of them. So that's kind of my advice is, match your needs to your crop and you'll do great.
That sounds like really simple advice, but but I feel like it might be more complex than that. But that's a good soundbite. Match your needs to your crop. That's very good advice. I have so many more questions I want to talk to you about. So you're going to have to come back on the show later so we can dig more haha, that's a joke. Dig more into cover crop discussion and alfalfa. And also I know that like you have a lot of experience in fire management and rangelands, and we didn't even get to talk about that. So you have to come back on the show.
It's time for our famous 3.
Is stress affecting your bottom line? Even routine handling, inclement weather, weaning, and dietary changes can significantly lower the rumen pH, causing cortisol levels to spike. Cortisol not only compromises the immune system, but also suppresses normal appetite and feed consumption. The solution? Cattle Active. Increase production and reduce the impacts of stress on your cattle for cents a day. Cattle Active restores the balance naturally. Want to learn more how a feeding program including Cattle Active can improve both profits and herd health? Visit us today at proearthanimalhealth.com. Be proactive with Cattle Active.
But for now, I want to do our closing questions. We ask every guest on the show the exact same 3 questions. It's kind of a fun little thing. And I just for our listeners, I did give Dr. Kohmann a heads up on these. So I'm not just like, coming at her out of left field with this. So the first one is, what is your favorite beef or cattle related resource? It can be a book, a website, could be a person, could be a podcast, whatever it is, but your favorite beef or cattle related resource.
So for me, there's this book. The title is very telling. The name is Forages. And there is a volume 1 and a volume 2. I know. So it's an introduction to grassland agriculture. And the editors are Michael Collins, Jerry Nelson, Kenneth Moore, and Robert Barnes. So this is a series of books. This is already on the 7th edition. So every so often we get an update of this. And it's just such a wonderful textbook. It just goes over, for example, what is a nitrogen replacing crop? Like, how does it happen? From grazing management, from like, what are the principles of good silage production? It's just, if you like forages and you like studying, this is like a textbook that basically has everything. So I have it right here by my side because I still go in and consult it every so often. It's like, oh, I'm sure I can find like a good definition for this, or if I have a question. And it also has some like species specific management tips for different locations in the whole of the United States.
Yeah.
So again, it's like a very good, if you love forage, this is a very good introductory type of book.
Okay. That's wonderful. That's good to know. Forages. I can remember the name of that book, Forages. Okay. So the next question is, what is your favorite non-beef or cattle related book? And if you don't have a favorite non-beef or cattle related book, what is a book that you are currently reading that you're enjoying?
All right. So again, this is like the little researcher in me. There's this book that some colleagues of mine wrote that is called Applied Statistics in Biology, a practical guide.
A practical guide, not a detailed guide, a practical guide.
Yeah. So it's excellent. So part of my job, like I am paid by the taxpayer. My job is to serve my stakeholders. The best thing that I can do is be really good with data analysis, because that's going to give me really a lot of confidence in the recommendations that I'm giving. So I'm always looking for ways to get better in analysis. So that has been a book that's been very helpful because it explains like a lot of statistics principles. But the practical part is it actually has some examples that you can try and analyze yourself. And it has all the responses too, so you can check what you've done. So it's been a great book. I have a bunch of like little tags on my book. It's at home because that's where I've been studying it.
Oh, page markers type thing, like where you can flip to the page and see what. Yeah.
So that's for me, it's been just a great resource.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. That is not one that I have read. So I have not done any statistics. After I got done with stats in grad school, I said never again. So
yes, I absolutely understand, and this is one of the reasons why I like it. Is just it makes it look a little bit less scary, because statistics can get so complicated. So I'm glad someone else wrote a book to figure it out, and I don't have to figure out. I just need to learn it.
Well, that's fun. The last question is, when you think of someone you admire or look up to, what is a characteristic they possess that has led them to be successful?
Yes. I can think about 2 people that I think they share the same characteristics. One is I have a twin sister. We're not identical, we're fraternal, and she's an ICU medical doctor back home in Brazil. So she studied a lot because it's a lot of steps to get there. But I think what I admire in her a lot is just how good of a person she is and how much she cares about her patients. I remember during COVID, her ICU unit was converted into a COVID ICU unit. And sometimes, you have a time in the day where you have a visiting time with family members and etc. And that was not possible to do in person at that time. So she had to do it over the phone. And sometimes a patient was not awake. But the family says, like, if you can talk to my husband, let them know how much, how much of a wonderful life we've had together. And I remember, even if the patient was not awake, she would walk by their bedside, sit down, and talk to them. And I really do think that makes a huge difference. And yeah, so even if the patient would not remember something like that, I do think that comes across in how she cares for people. Yeah, she's so smart. But I think what I care most about is how kind she is. And the same thing for my PhD advisor. His name is Lynn Solenberger. So he's like one of the greatest authorities in forage knowledge, etc. in Florida. He just retired. But if you spend some time with him, you wouldn't say that in the sense that he's just so down to earth and so calm, because things go wrong when you're trying to run field experiments. He never despaired. Again, he grew up at a dairy farm. So I think, again, like that kind of resilience that a farmer has. He was just so kind with everyone. It didn't matter what question you had, what kind of background you had, like if you came from an agronomy farming kind of background, or if you've never seen a plant of corn before, he had the same type of commitment to explain things. And he comes from a family of educators too. And it's, again, he's this super famous scientist, but he's just one of the kindest people that I've met. So I still see him very often, he and his wife, Andrea. And they've been kind of great substitute parents in a way, because, when you move abroad, you're a little lonely. So having them as professional, but then also personal support has been absolutely life transforming. I would never think that little me, who grew up in this small town in southern Brazil, would be in a position where I'm now a professor in a great university in the United States. And this trajectory was only possible because of how good of a mentor he was. So I'm very thankful for that, for sure.
Yeah, that's very wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's really nice. Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful note to end on, like a very happy, heartwarming thing to end on. And that is all the questions that we have for today and the time we have. Although, again, you have to come back so we can talk more. I have just really enjoyed talking with you. It's been a really easy conversation to have. And I am now very ready for spring and green grass after talking with you. If listeners have questions for you, or they want to learn more about your work or our discussion today, where can they do that?
So I do have a website, which is Forage Systems .cals, CALS.wisc, WISC.edu. So WISC edu is Wisconsin EDU education. And CALS is for College of Agricultural Life Sciences.
foragesystems.cals.wisc.edu.
Yes. So I have information there about like the research or reports, about the different students and their projects and what they've been up to, and events as well. So whenever we're hosting like field days or workshops, I try to keep that as up to date as possible. And you should be able to find my contact there as well. So my email is also listed with my name.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I have typed that in, and it will be in the show notes for our listeners. And then if you will send me the name of the paper or the link to the paper. I will also put that in the footnotes so people can navigate the different allelopathy rye varieties. But again, it was so nice to meet you, Dr. Kohmann, and thank you for sharing your time here with us today. Like I said, I really just truly enjoyed having this conversation with you. Thank you for being here. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. And we will meet you back here next week on the Beef Podcast, presented by Wisenetics.